Hello everyone, welcome back. This is 2-5 Redstone changes from 1.11 to 1.19 in the Compact Redstone series. I'm MU222, and as the title suggests, we will talk about the Redstone changes from 1.11 through to 1.19. Now you might think, why is this useful? Now, as Redstoneers, we do want to convey more information about our Redstone contraptions, and one of the um, useful information is to tell people which versions your contraption actually works. And uh, by learning the Redstone updates, you would know more about your contraption basically. For example, you would know that some components are only added a bit late, and some components are added a bit early. And yeah, knowing this would be useful for your communications basically. Now, I'm making this video as also as a supplement because this information isn't really widely known, as Minecraft Wiki doesn't really do a good job on this, because Minecraft Wiki isn't really specialized for Redstone people to check out the Redstone updates and what changes. So making this video also helps you to gain more information and access this information more easily. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So we'll head on and start from 1.11 first, and then go out all the way to 1.19. So for 1.11, well, there's only one change, and that is they've added observers. Although this is a small change, it completely changes the world of Redstone basically. Because observer provides a lot more potentials, a lot more new wiring techniques, and essentially Redstone records have to be separated into observer doors and observerless doors. And you can see just how big of a change observers bring. And this is also what makes doors a lot more compact and some impossible ideas possible, basically. So that's for 1.11. I'll go on to 1.12. Well, 1.12 is also a very simple addition. It's not as useful as observers, but they still have a use, and that is glazed terracotta. Now, I haven't talked anything about the properties of glazed terracotta, so I will just include them here. So you see, if I push this glazed terracotta with a sticky piston, it actually can't be retracted. That's because glazed terracotta is only pushable but not retractable. So that's a property. Another property is that it doesn't stick to either slime or honey. Now, honey block isn't added in 1.12 yet, but then we'll see when it's added later. So we'll move on to one of the major changes to Redstone. Well, basically there are a lot more additions or changes, and that is 1.13. 1.13 includes some different features, including they have made node blocks updaters. Previously, node blocks already exist, but only in 1.13 does node blocks become updaters, and you can also detect them basically. So that's a major change, because now you basically have a one block solid updater, because before we have to use pistons or rails, etc., which have some drawbacks in themselves. So no block doesn't need block support, for example. So yeah, no block is quite useful, and it can also replace dropper when droppers can't be used, for example, due to quasi connectivity. So yeah, no blocks are useful. Another things they have added is they have added observers basically. They can now detect shape changes from glass panes, cobblestone walls, and fences. So you can see if I press these three buttons, all of the pistons will pulse basically. So there will be more changes regarding cobblestone walls later, but then for now it's just this. Another change is that they have made stairs and other blocks waterloggable basically. So you can see when the dispenser dispenses this water into the stair, the observer can detect it. So, very nice. And then another thing this is more useful to observer stores, but then it will sometimes still appear in observer doors, and that is they have made minecart floats possible, or they just basically work in 1.13. So here you see you have this minecart here with a hopper. If I actually place any item inside this minecart chest, it will get sucked into the hopper. Now this will be formally introduced in 2-10 basic entity usage, but I'll just show you how you can replicate this setup exactly. So you want a minecart here. Now if I type this command, you will see it has some decimals, -12.5, 65, 19.5. Currently, this hopper won't accept items from this minecart chest because it's still within this block. But then if I do a float, for example, you can 0-tick a piston, push it towards it. Now if I use the same command again, you can see the difference. So before it's 19.5, now it's 19.5, 1, 6 zeros, and a small number. So that indicates a float basically, and now this item will be dropped into the hopper. What's cool about this setup is that even though this minecart is slightly into this block, you can still place blocks here. So it's sometimes useful. And yeah, another change is regarding burnouts. Burnouts have a minor change. One is very peculiar, not going to even demonstrate here. The other one is literally just a timing change, so people probably won't notice it. But then I'm just going to show it here because it's still technically a redstone change. Now moving on, we have stairs. You can finally place redstone components on the side of the stairs. Before you can still place things on the top but not on the side, but now you can place it on the side. So yeah, not really big of a deal, but then more stuff is better than less, I guess. And another thing they've added is bubble columns. You can actually detect bubble columns with observers. Now how do you create bubble columns? Well, we just use either soul sand or magma block. So you can see this will pulse twice, same for this one, it will pulse twice. So yeah, and that's all for 1.13 already. I'll move on to talk about a bug that is present only in 1.13. So we have this setup here. Now I'm not going to exactly demonstrate what it would happen because I'm not in 1.13, I'm in 1.19 actually. Now what happens is that during 1.13, this block, normally this observer would detect the movements here instantly compared to this one tick, but then during 1.13 it doesn't. It detects when the block actually arrives here. So it ends up these two circuits will have the equal amount of delay, and these two pistons will fire at the same time, but then obviously now it doesn't, like so. So luckily that has been fixed, and this bug also causes many redstone contraptions to fail in 1.13 especially, but then they're fixed in 1.13.1, so that's nice. So that's basically about this, and I will talk about 1.14 now. 1.14 has some interesting stuff. For example, we have the scaffolding that has been added. Another thing they've added is campfires. Now, campfire isn't really a redstone component, but then it can be detected via an observer if you have a hay bale block, like so. So yeah, some minor changes. For example, they have made stained glass and beacons, for example, to have the ability to place redstone components on the top or on the side of it. Now you might ask, why would you use such an expensive material such as a beacon? It's because beacons are transparent, they are full block, and they are immovable. So you can see sometimes people use beacons. Although if you don't need it to be a full block, you can always use a hopper instead. And then another small change is they added sweet berries. Sweet berries themselves again isn't really a redstone component, but then they can use as a substitute to cobweb. So I have this setup here where 3 armor stands will get pushed up by a soul sand into strings here and power these 3 pistons. Now the middle one is going to pulse first, then the left one, then the right one. The right one will pulse actually with a significant delay. Now you can see that the left one actually slows down the armor stand slightly bit, but not too much. So that might be useful in some contraptions, although I would say that sweet berries do have a lot more limitations because you need this grass block in the first place just to support the sweet berry. And in addition, most contraptions I see uses cobweb because they really need a long delay, and having a long delay actually is more preferable. In the cases I've seen, basically. Or it simply doesn't matter. And yeah, the limitations brought by sweet berries is just a bit too much, such that you don't really see them too often. But I did see them in a few occasions. So anyways, they've added composters. Now, before composters, the only container that is movable and can give a comparator output is cauldron, which can only give a maximum signal strength of 3, but then composter is 8. It can't give 7 though, because 7 will just jump to 8, so yeah, but still 8 is pretty nice. Another thing they have added is that you can now place redstone components on the side of pistons such that they can give a 0-tick pulse, so very nice. Next thing is that you can do minecart clips in hoppers now. Again, this will be introduced in 2-10 basic entity usage, but then I'll just demonstrate here. So basically, why this works is because they have added hopper internal hitboxes to it. So how do you do this exactly? Well, I'll use the most traditional method. That is to do this with fence gate, slanted rail. You just do that, it's like a 1-tick pulse. Now do not break this fence gate because the minecart is not supported and it will just fall to the void, and you don't want that. You want to have something, for example, like a soul sand to push it upwards. And now this minecart will sit on the hopper, and this also means that the minecart will deliver items into the hopper, so yeah, very nice. And another thing they have changed is that sand will now teleport instantaneously if there's a boat below, and it will just teleport into this position. So if you see here, this sand literally gets teleported. This setup is useful in 0-tick doors. There are a lot of setups similar to this. This is known as the small boats. They also have the regular boats, which consists of 3 boats usually. But yeah, anyways, so this is the smallest design that I find, and it's actually quite simple to build. So I'm just going to demonstrate this here. And then another thing they have changed is that rails can finally get pushed vertically upwards. Before, they can be pushed vertically downwards, but just not upwards. And they finally decided to change that. So this would be useful, again, for observerless doors, usually, because now you can push the texture rails, and you can just basically use a slider to power, for example, side pistons or something with minecarts. And this would be quite useful in some doors. So, yeah. That's all for 1.14. Now I will go on to 1.15. 1.15 just have 2 minor changes. One is that they added honey block, an alternative to slime block, basically. The difference for honey block is that first off they have a smaller hitbox than a full block. So if I run into here, I am at 23.7. But now if I run into this honey block, I'm at 23.762. So yeah, honey block has a slightly smaller hitbox. Another thing is that they've made bells updaters along with no blocks in 1.13. So bells are transparent, that's the difference. So there you go. Now moving on to 1.16. 1.16 introduced some changes that people love or hate, whatever you think. But then it still has some useful stuff that's added. And the first one being target block. Target block is the only solid block that can redirect redstone dust. So very useful indeed. It can also do some other stuff. For example, you can throw projectiles on it, and then it will just have a signal. So yeah, that isn't really used too much, but then yeah, it's just mainly for redirecting redstone dust and being a solid block. Another thing that they have made changes to is the redstone dust. They have made significant changes to redstone dust. A lot of these modules are literally about this. Basically, the idea is to make redstone more intuitive, because redstone does exhibit some visuals that doesn't match with how they would actually power stuff. So for example here, now before you have this piston actually being powered by this redstone dust, because this is a half slab, aka a transparent block, and this redstone dust actually doesn't care this redstone dust, and it would stay as a cross like dust, or before it's actually dots, and it would actually power this piston. But now it would consider this redstone dust and will get redirected such that this piston doesn't power anymore. Another thing is this. Again, this is more intuitive. You have a signal strength of 2 that powers through this block and powers this piston. Now before, you actually need to have this redstone dust to power to be able to power this piston, because technically this redstone dust isn't really phasing into this block, although the visuals look like it back before 1.16. But now during 1.16, it would realize, the redstone dust would realize that it's being redirected by this redstone dust, so it will power now. So if I remove this, it doesn't power, but if I place it back, it will power. Another thing is this here. Now before, this doesn't power, but now it does. Before, if you need this to power, you need to extend this redstone line. That's because redstone dust before, they, like in here for example, they consider themselves as facing this way but not this way. So that's why it didn't power before, but then now it does, because you know the redstone line literally is going here and here, so it should power this piston. That's the way they decide to make it more intuitive. And another thing, so for example here, before this dropper would not even get powered, but now it does, because this redstone dust is basically facing towards this dropper and should power it. And yeah, the repeater here, anyways, so the repeater doesn't really contribute to the redirection of the redstone dust before, I guess. And if you actually do this, it will before 1.16 it will actually power, but then if you place a repeater, it doesn't power. So yeah, it's a very strange behavior. And now they have made it more intuitive, I guess. So due to the intuitive change, they also need to make redstone dots actually behave like a dot. So this would not power, but this will power. So they've made their original redstone dots a redstone cross. So you might think, what's the usage of the redstone dots? Well, you can just basically power stuff below, I guess, but not on the sides. So maybe useful when you need to have signal transmissions in a weird way. Yeah. Anyways, they've also have other changes besides dust changes, like I have mentioned a lot of them, but then they still have other stuff. For example, piston back would now not break redstone components on top. So for example here, they didn't break these redstone components, same as this redstone torch. Even though this powers, it extends and retracts, this redstone torch will not be broken and pop off. So yeah, more changes. If you place it on the side top of this piston, the pressure plate, when you activate and deactivate, the pressure plate no longer breaks. So that's useful when you consider some entities placed specifically to power some stuff for this piston. So yeah, I'll introduce that in 2-10 basic entity usage again. Don't worry. And speaking of changes from the cobblestone wall, we finally have some new stuff. So cobblestone walls will detect blocks above and also have some, for example, this cobblestone pillar. And then yeah, you can see this will cause change in shape for this cobblestone wall and this piston pulses. Now, if you remember before, the bubble column basically serves as a vertically upwards signal transmitter. This serves as a vertically downward signal transmitter, and it's also instant, so very nice. Except the observer and the rest of the torch, of course. And yeah, that's basically all for 1.16 already. I'll talk about 1.17. 1.17 doesn't have that much as 1.16, but it's still a bit useful. So they've added powdered snow, so you can dispense it. And powdered snow themselves are pushable and transparent. And yeah, judging by the sounds, you can also hear the skulk sensor is in action. So they did act the skulk sensor in 1.17, although they are basically useless. I don't really see any redstone contraptions apart from maybe one or two that uses skulk sensors and is actually useful. Because skulk sensors detect too much stuff, and detecting too much stuff essentially make them worthless. So yeah, some drawbacks for the skulk sensor. Although it's very good for wireless stuff, detecting too much actually causes a lot of drawbacks. So professional redstonians really didn't use them, to be honest. And then they've also added lightning rods. Lightning rod is a transparent, pushable dust redirector. That's it. It's very quirky, I know. But then, hey, it still serves as a purpose. So that's for 1.17. We now have 1.18 and also actually 1.18.2. So what are these two hoppers doing? Well, this doesn't explain anything. What they actually changed is, remember when I said 1.14 they've added hopper internal hitboxes? Well, in 1.18 they changed the hopper internal hitbox positions. Before 1.18, the hopper internal hitboxes are every 8th, so 1/8, 2/8, all the way to 7/8, and then a specific one as 11/16. And now they've decided that hopper internal hitboxes are causing lag, I think. So they decided to reduce it such that the downwards hopper now only has these 3 values and the sideways hopper has only these 4 values. So that's basically it. And then for 1.18.2, this pissed off quite a few redstoners is due to a bug that they have to fix for sand performance to the game. And essentially before you would have this hopper being unpowered 1 game tick earlier than this piston due to the sand falling property. But now, as they fix the bug, the hopper and the piston will get depowered at the same time, and you can see both of them power at the same time. And before it's not the case, but now it's the case. This pissed off some redstoners because sand serves as a useful tool for generating odd game tick delay, but in 1.18.2 they removed this ability to do so. So yeah, we basically have one less choice of doing odd game tick pulse as our odd game tick delays. And this is also exactly why I didn't include this setup in 2-2 haptic components and their applications, because I know that this has been removed in 1.18.2, so very unfortunate, but then we still have to deal with it. So yeah, so that's for 1.18, and I guess specifically 1.18.2 as well. So 1.19 now. 1.19 has some special stuff. Mangrove roots, they have added this, and they are waterloggable, and it's also solid. You can actually push them as well. They're just like normal blocks, except it's waterloggable. And leaves are now waterloggable, so this has some big potentials. For example, you can have the leaf act as an updater while also dispensing water, such that you can get an observer output. So yeah, and perhaps doing some crisscross circuits as well. So yeah, we'll see what this offers in the future. So that's all for 1.19, and that actually already concludes the video. No exercises, because this video is more informative than to be teaching you any redstone knowledge. So thank you all for watching, and if I haven't missed out anything, oh yeah, since this video is informative, to be honest, and you don't really need a work download, so no work download will be available. Instead, I will be creating a PowerPoint file just to summarize the key changes to you, and you can check that out if you want to. And yeah, thank you for watching. I will see you in 2-6. Circuits more on piston extender circuits, I think. So yeah, I'll see you soon.